Okay, good afternoon, digital health enthusiasts. It's great to be back on the stage of Digital Health Nordic. This time, I'm happy to be here with Nina and Pia. We have a pretty simple topic today, breaking down the data silos. But first, I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself briefly, because we have lots of to say and pretty large topics. So
my name is Pia Hardy. I work for McKinsey & Company. I'm based in Stockholm, but work a lot in Helsinki as well. And digital and recently advanced analytics and AI are really passionate subjects for me. So very happy to be here and discuss this with you.
My name is Nina Nissilä, and I work as a director in Kela, the Social Insurance Institute of Finland, and I'm in charge of IT and shared services in Kela.
Okay, thank you. It's been said that data is fuel of AI, but actually it's also fuel of everything else in the future digital health. If we try to break down this pretty massive subject, I think that we need to find the data and then start to think that how can we prevent the silos even kind of building up in the first place. So let's start with the small question. What is the key data or the types of data that we need to improve the health in general?
And pretty big question, right? I think that when it comes, if you look at an individual person, the medical data produced that's relevant is about 10 to 20%. If you add genetic information, it's another 10 to 20%. And then it's a lot of data that's very relevant for a person's health outcome, which is actually from the social side, the environment, behavioral things, family relationships, etc. So therefore, it's not only about what the medical profession produces in terms of data and owns, but also what the individual produces and how to make these data sets integrated and work together for analysis, for better health outcomes, for better care.
Well, you pretty much emptied the bucket already, but I would say that we should start, of course, by identifying the persons we are talking about. And also, maybe adding to that list, which I totally agree actually, is that the family history might be something that worthwhile investigating as well, because we are the production of our parents, and in that sense, many of the things that we are actually, how we live and how our genes work, they are based on the fact that we have inherited certain elements from our parents.
Okay, and there has been lots of talk about data today also, and what I noticed that we usually talk lots of the data in general and the technical side of it, but sometimes we forget that the people or the individuals are in the center of all of this. And we should look into more how the individuals are willing to kind of use the services in healthcare. So what do you think is or should be the short-term goals? Because this is massive subject. What are the short-term goals that we need to achieve in first and then carry on the journey?
Well, I'm slightly worried that people are quite eager nowadays to give their data to some foreign companies somewhere outside Finnish borders. So one thing what I would like to see, and this is not a paid advertisement to Mehiläinen, but feel free to kind of use the information, is that I would like to see that we also have in future Finnish stakeholders, companies or public or private sector, I don't care actually, who are as eager to collect this kind of information and base their services around our DNA data, etc. We don't have really relevant players in the field right now, and that's why people are sending the information to some foreign countries, and that is something that I would like to see more happening in future.
Okay, well, that's a good topic to talk about a little more, because there is lots of data that we are creating every day through our mobile apps, and there is big kind of ecosystems like Apple, Amazon, and Google that kind of gathers the data that we activity and nutrition and habits and etc. There is also lots of social media data, pictures taken about 1 billion a day, data from reported moods, and so on. So the question, and it's kind of continuing that hope that you had that, for example, Mehiläinen would gather that data more. So the key question is basically who owns the data and who should store it, who should control it, and how it should be shared. So do you, Pia, have some insights to this?
It's a great question, and we're coming from a situation where all the data that we thought was relevant in healthcare came from the medical profession, right? And that was owned by the providers, where it was collected at the point of care. And now we're talking very much about going fundamentally the other way and saying that all the data that any person generates is relevant, and that person should own the data. And I don't think either extreme actually captures the right situation. There is, of course, a lot of data that you should have the right to decide on, and most certainly you should have the right to know what data there is of you, and the ability to correct it, quite frankly, if it's wrong. We've found that people that read their medical records actually find faults and misdiagnosis and missing information, and it's very, very effective way to improve the data is actually to get the patient themselves, the consumer themselves, to actually review and refine. But on the other hand, there is data which is very, very relevant for the broader society, or even just the immediate family. If a genetic disease is discovered in a patient, a very ethical question immediately comes, is that the ownership of that patient? Or should that information, which is very relevant to the children or to relatives, also be shared, and on which grounds? And further on, if I could contribute with my data to cancer research or to rare diseases, is that something that I should be able to donate my data for, or should actually the government say, this is of national interest, we think that this data should be used? So it's very difficult questions, because there's broader value as well.
That's exactly true. It is very tempting to think that I should own my own data. The first question, of course, is that what does it mean that you own your data? What are your rights based on the fact that you own something? It's easy to say if you own a car, what are your kind of rights in that case? But if you own your data, what are your rights to do with the data at that point? And it's something that might be really relevant me as a single piece of data might be actually that it's not as such relevant to any other participant in that kind of form. But in case there are 20,000 others who give the same information to certain database, for example, so it might actually be that there is a huge national interest in that kind of amount of data. So do I have a right to decide which kind of which piece of the information I give to the holiness of the database, or should I be able to say that no, I don't want to be part of this? And then the other part is that even if by giving the right to use the data in the first place, I might be kind of understanding the situation and understanding the user rights and all that stuff. But how many, in real life, seriously, how many of us are actually thinking what happens afterwards? So if somebody changes the rules of the database, how they use the data, to what purposes they use the data, how many of you are kind of understanding that first thing, that might be possible, and the second part is that even if they send you kind of new letter that please accept the rules, etc., do you really read the kind of long story, small print, etc.? So that's why it's a kind of do we actually really understand what it means to own data in that sense? So I'm not actually, even though I would like to, I'm really supporting the idea of my data, etc. I'm not against it, but I'm really unsure whether we are really ready to own our data. Do we really understand what it means and what kind of responsibilities comes with ownership as well?
Yeah, that's true. And when talking about sharing and controlling the data and thinking about the data silos that, for instance, different institutions and different providers have, every time the individual is in the center of it all. So it kind of makes sense that the individual actually is the hub where the data is shared and controlled. I share the idea that there is lots of question marks if should we own our own data. I definitely think that we should own our data, but the mechanism that how we actually use it in other interests is another question, basically. But I think that maybe when we store the data in the national archives or some kind of other data lakes, but we should also be able to control the data. Of course, there is some patient data that maybe we need to protect the individuals not sharing it, some shady services or something like that, but the rules of that kind of sharing is pretty impossible to make, basically. You maybe have the right to share or you don't have the right to share. But I think that the kind of the easiest solution tear down the data silos is that we use the individual as a hub to share the data.
That's actually quite interesting question, and I would actually like to ask from you that I've noticed that quite many people are interested in digging deep to their family history and looking for their forefathers from different databases, etc. And part of my story and your story and everybody's story is also the story of their forefathers. What are their names and where they lived and when they what was their birth date and when they died, etc. So do you own that information as well, since it's a little piece of your own data? Or is it actually that you own like 50% of your data, which you have yourself produced, and the rest of the part is something that you brought along when you got birth? So that's a kind of interesting philosophical question, actually.
Yeah, so in the future, is the data actually inherited from your parents to you? And another question that I get a lot is that should we as a Mehiläinen try to give an opportunity to our customers to sell the data to different parties? This is actually a pretty general question and relates to the rights of using the data, but what do you think about making money with your own data?
Minefield. It can't hurt anyone else, right? So when you sell your own data, you might also be selling your children's data, as you were saying. Yeah. So what right has that child have, and distant relatives that might suffer from the same thing? What I absolutely think there should be is a way to donate your data. So the incentive shouldn't be to make money off your own data. It also shouldn't be that somebody else makes money off your data, especially your health data, especially very sensitive data. So I wouldn't want any commercial player here or abroad to get access to a lot of our data, which unfortunately some already do. But to donate data, to actively make a choice that my data should be used for research, which sometimes is hard here, and people complain about. If you're a cancer survivor, for example, and you feel that you really want to help others, or you actually have somebody who died in cancer and you also want to help with that data, and that's not possible. So if we take the money out of the equation, I'm much more for that than if you involve the money.
Yeah, well, I'm representing the public sector, so we only spend money. We don't pretty much sell in that sense. Actually, we do, but not the health data in that sense. We do give it to some research purposes in certain very limited cases. But yeah, well, it's interesting because there are people, not me, but some other people who say that actually if you could sell the Finnish health data that we have, we could actually solve the government's budget issues for quite some time. But I highly doubt that that's a wise solution either, because it's even though it's a kind of tempting amount of money that we could get from selling the health information to some medical institutes or pharmacy companies or something like that, but still I think the best is to use it in our own purposes.
Yeah, I actually share the idea with you guys, and I think what we should focus on is that how we can utilize the data to make the benefits, which can be pretty valuable when we try to kind of make more efficient ways to solve the kind of health or wellness problems to our customers or nationwide for our citizens. Well, we have great national archives, and maybe the next question is, or what we should think about is that what are the next steps to actually drive the breaking down the data silos, or maybe there is no data silos, but what should we do that we can make the most from the data that we actually have but can't use? And what's the role of the national archives in that?
My initial thinking, there are data silos, right? There obviously are, and integrating them would be fantastic. But there is also a problem with the raw data. Unfortunately, we're not just getting pure, wonderfully usable data like oil from the ground. We also get gravel and pine cones and God knows what in that data. And it's because it's not collected in a very structured way at the point of care, or that it's not really identified, which data is relevant in which circumstances and how it should be captured and stored in the most practical way. And that's where I really think that, just as in utilities have a value in fuel, the government has a role in structuring how we collect and store data, because a single provider simply can't do it. That's what we've had so far. That's why we have 15 different ways of defining blood pressure in the same country, or dosages for medication, etc. So we need structures, standards, how boring it could be, both technical and semantic standards, and the only one who can take that role is a national body, and preferably actually an international body, in, of course, in an efficient way. Unfortunately, it usually tends to be quite cumbersome, but it is difficult.
That's true, and I would definitely say that we have silos. We have silos even inside one stakeholder in that sense. A couple of years ago, I was having a vaccination for the tick issue, and in a public sector health center, and the vaccination itself took like 30 seconds or something. It wasn't a big issue, but the whole time that I spent with the doctor was like 10 minutes, because she had to rewrite everything, every information again to the system. So even though I've already given the information, what is the reason why I'm coming to meet her, and etc. So she didn't have the time information, nor the reason information, nor the information about the prescription, which is also in one system. So she had to write them all over again to another system, so that it actually goes to the patient archives later on, I'm assuming. So it means that there are silos inside of this one health center, actually, in that sense. Well, I'm assuming that she was using a system that are quite commonly used in the southern Finland. But it definitely means that there are silos between different participants in this area, and it means that the service that we can give to customers is not the best possible in that sense. It was a nice time spent with the doctor, but it could have been less, actually.
Yeah, so we need forerunners basically to collect the data in also other sources than patient records or that sense. And actually, what I was thinking that we might need to create even more data by getting the reasons why people are actually using the health services. And that's something that we actually don't have. We only have the kind of the conclusions that the professional made, what's the solution, and we actually don't have the actual problems. And we're trying to find the problems from the data, and maybe we should just start from there, that we actually ask the patient that what's wrong and what's the issue. Okay, so I think there was pretty interesting insights, and then we covered only a fraction of this whole big topic. But I think that we have the structure in Finland that enables us to kind of drive this data collection and data utilization in healthcare. But we actually need actions. We need the data, and we need to kind of make services for customers that they want to actually use. So we need to focus on the customer and the patient and the individual and collect more data from there. And after that, we can maybe get there that's fuel for AI, and we can learn. Okay, I thank you. And then we actually have time for questions. Does someone have questions, tough or easier? Doesn't matter. There's a great panelists here to answer and give insights. I'm not sure is it too tough of a topic or too easy, that this is all just
There is one question.
There. Do we have a mic, or can you yell?
Hello, my name is Veronica Fellman. I come from Sipoon Palvelusäätiö. I'd like to ask you about the previous speaker's comment about Kanta. What do you think about the Kanta, which in principle belongs, it's a national system with health information, belongs to all the Finns. What do you think about that as a case? Thank you.
Well, if you ask me, I love Kanta, of course. I'm in charge of the IT in that area, so it's the best ever. It's actually, I've actually used it myself as well, and the latest version especially, it's really kind of good working in that sense, that the customer experience is really, really good. And well, I'm objective, of course, but I feel that it's a good thing that we have one common place for every participant, for the customers as well, but also for the healthcare system, that everybody gets to use the same system. So in that sense, it's a really super thing. But it's a good thing also that the background information comes from different sources, so that it doesn't mean that there has to be only one source. So I like the idea that it works as a hub for the Finnish society.
And I think it would be even greater than if you could use it as myself as an individual. If I could choose to use that Kanta's data from a different user interface, kind of like if I like to use Oma Mehiläinen app, I could actually give a permission that can I use this user interface for the data. And then if I like to go to Mehiläinen, and then I have all the data there and it's still secured.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So we need to work on the APIs and make that happen. Okay, the clock is at 0, so we need to leave. So thank you once again, and have a nice afternoon. And tomorrow there are going to be lots of interesting topics left. Thank you.